Okay, so how are these going to go?
Alright, so there's battery leads on the bottom of this, these two, and there are 4 holes back here. So we're going to just kind of run it through there on either side, like so. That way the leads come out through the top right here. Okay, and then we take 4 screws, and there are holes down the center of each battery pack, 2 on each, that line up with the base perfectly, so you can just screw it right in. Now remember, when you're screwing this in, try not to, you don't have to do it too tight, but you want to be tight enough. If you tighten it too much, you might wind up stripping the area we're screwing into. Since there's no nuts with this, what it means to strip it is that it won't be able to hold itself in place. So once you feel the screw get a little tight, go ahead and stop. Again, this is not going to be an off-road or anything that's going to be taking a lot of damage to it, so it doesn't have to be super tight, but just tight enough to hold everything in place as the robot does move around. Okay. One more screw there. There you have it. 4 screws, battery pack is in place, the leads are on the outside, and that completes step 4. Now, step 5, we're going to actually mount the motors. So how are these motors going to be mounted onto this kit? That was one of my first questions, because it wasn't really straightforward for me, but we're going to find out now. Okay, so let's see here. So what we're going to be doing is actually the motor mounts, and they get installed from the top side. So in this case, we were right. The top side is this side here. So we're going to go ahead and put these like so. And hold on here. Let's backtrack. The insert actually says something here. It says the image is wrong for step 5, and they pretty much show us what needs to be done. Sure enough, when you look at the image, you're looking at the battery pack here. So don't get confused, maybe use the insert. The insert shows you the correct way, which we had already assumed. But if this is your first time building a robot, it might be a little confusing, so you might have gone by that image. It's a little misleading. Again, this doesn't have to be very tight, but just make sure it's tight enough so that it screws in and it holds the component in place. That's good for that one. Oops, looks like we're a little off there. So in this case, if you're a little off on the holes, don't get frustrated. Just loosen the other screw a little bit, and then you can should be able to just slip the next screw without a problem. Now we have the other one here. There we go. Alright, so the motor mounts are now in place. As you can see, they extend downward like little wings, facing down towards the battery pack, and they're screwed in from the top. Remember, we referred to the insert that came with the kit and not the actual manual. So we're done with step 5. So now we're moving on to step 6. So step 6, we're actually going to mount the motors and the wheels. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to mount the wheels. The wheels are these little rubber round things here, and they're just going to slip right into the motor. There you go. That's one. And we have a secondary one here. 2. Simple enough. Ready to go. Now the next part is to actually mount it. So conveniently they've included 2 pieces of double-sided tape, which are going to be mounted onto the motor itself, and then I'm assuming what we're going to be doing is mounting those onto these here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to kind of measure this out, because this double-sided tape isn't always measured exactly right. And I'm going to make sure I'm going to get just the right size sliver so that this fits correctly. I don't like to have any overlap. So it looks like we might be able to get away with just one. So I'm going to take a hobby knife, that's the only additional tool that we're using right now, and I'm just kind of eyeballing this in. Okay. And put a little mark on it here so I know where to cut. And sure enough, here we go. Okay. Now if you've never worked with double-sided tape, all you have to do is put a little sliver on it, and then you bend it and it kind of just cuts right away. I'm going to cut the similar size piece. Now if you're working with a knife, make sure that you're careful with it and you don't cut yourself. Also that any surface underneath does not get ruined. So there we go, we've gone ahead and cut that piece, and we're going to mount it one on each one of these motors. So I'm just going to take off one side and press it down. Give it a good firm push. Sets in. Now, before acting this, is you put on the double-sided tape and let it sit overnight.
Just speaking from experience, gives the glue on the double-sided tape some time to set in. We're not going to actually do that. We're going to go ahead and give it a good push and then move on. But if you want this kit to last you a little longer, just let it sit overnight before actually using it, and it should hold it in place for quite a long time. And notice how when I cut that, now I also have some leftover pieces. So that's good. In case it come off later on, we can just take off the existing one and put it back on. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to mount this. So I'm looking at the diagram here, and the way this is going to be mounted is basically like so, pointing downward. But that way at the wheels, so we've got the upper part here, and we're going to mount it downward, like so. Now, there are some white notches on the motors that you have to pay attention to, right there. Each one has one. And in the picture it says to make sure we mount it in a certain way. So it wants to have this notch on this motor forward, which on this one it is, and it's going to be mounted here. When I actually mount this one, actually I got to flip this around because I have the double-sided tape, so it's actually going to be this one. So this one's going to be mounted here, and this one has the white thing here, so it's going to be mounted like so. Okay, so let me just see here. Actually this didn't get mounted right. Let me take the last piece here. You can see when I just made a mistake here is that the tape didn't set right, and I was just able to peel it right off. It goes back to the example about how you should let it sit overnight and let it sit in and get a good firm hold. So what we're actually going to do now is that we're going to go ahead and mount these motors. So we're going to take off the other side of the double-sided tape. Okay, so that's one.
Okay. And what I'm doing here is I lifted it up slightly so I can make sure that when I mount it, it's actually a little bit beneath the battery. So that way it does move around. There we go. Now you might want to give it a good firm press. This one needs to be mounted a little bit lower.
The reason why I'm mounting this a little bit lower, so you can see, is that if you were to take this look, here's the batteries. The batteries are going to be mounted here, so you want to make sure that these wheels are actually touching whatever they're going to be sitting on. The reason why is that that's the primary means of locomotion for this robot. Locomotion meaning that that's how that robot moves around. These are the wheels that move around this Beetle. You can see we know that we're good because this is moving around nicely. So again, let's go back and give this a firm press and hold it for a while. Okay, press for me. 7 is the power switch. So
4K. Okay. So we're going to need to wire this up.
now take caution when you're doing a step. Do not hurry through it. If this is your time working with Lex, you want to time, you want to do this right, you want to make sure there's no mistakes, because if you make any mistakes with the electronic,
You will wind up damaging the sensitive components that you have on there. Luckily for us, there's not a lot of sensitive components on here, but we still could damage something if we're not careful. So again, you want to be careful. You want to make sure you do it right.